Okay, so yesterday, in the middle of discussing whether or not a kohen is a shluch of the Rachmana, or if he's a shliach of the Bailam, one of the rayas that came in one of the rayas that came in, the Gemara needed to deflect it. So one of the rayas that came in was from the fact that it says in our Mishnah that the kohen is allowed to be makrav of kinezovin, kineyolos, katois, vasholos. And the Gemara said that you don't have a raya from our Mishnah because our Mishnah doesn't say that a kohen could be makrav any type of carbon on behalf of a Yisrael. Our Mishnah is very specific in the type of karbonis that a kohen could do, and those are karbonis of zov and zova, which there's a specific limit in the Torah referring to them, where it says Zois Torah Sazov, and the Torah Sazov, we learn from that you could bring a carbon for your children that are ketanim, which means that you could bring it without their das. If you could bring it without their das, then obviously you don't need their das. So even for an adult, you could bring it because you see you don't need their das. If you see you don't need their das, then by you bringing it wouldn't be you doing their shlichus. And therefore, you don't have a raya from here that kohanim are shluchei of shluchim of the Rachmana. Could be they're even shluchim of people, and really they wouldn't be able. A kohen would not be able to be makar a carbon on behalf of someone who's not allowed to have enough from him. The karbonos in the Mishnah are different because you could bring those karbonos without das of the Bible, which led us into analyzing other places where it says Zois Torahs, such as Torah Hayaledes, where we learned that a person could bring the karbonos of a Yeledes for his wife, even though his wife is a shoita. And the Gemara even says that if his wife is not an usher, a woman is never considered an usher, because Mashakana Isha Kana Baila. Or more accurately, a wife is never considered an ashira, because Mashakana Isha Kana Baila. Yet, when the husband brings the carbon on behalf of his wife, he could bring a carbon usher. Why? Because he's allowed to bring it independent of her. Based on that, the Gemara had a challenge, and that's what we're starting with this morning. So we're coming off the assumption that from Zois Torah Hayaledes, we learned that someone's allowed to bring karbonos for his wife, who's a shaita, because bringing karbonos on her behalf does not require das. What type of karbonos are we referring to? Zois Torah Hayaledes. The karbonos that the Torah tells us a man could bring on behalf of his wife, who's a shaita, or karbonos of a yeledes. And on that the Gemara asks, right at the first word at the top of Daf Lamed Vav Amud Aleph. Moshe Rab Simi bar Ashi. Im haya kohen. If the person was a kohen, so we're going back to a brisa that's very similar to our Mishnah. Im haya kohen. If the person you may not have enough from is a kohen, nevertheless, Yizrek alav dam chatasoy v'dam hashamay. Now, the Ram speaks out that Bishlam our Mishnah, we said that the dam chatasoy and hashamay, because our Mishnah actually says the same nusach. It doesn't chatois v'shamayis, but it says it after it listed off the kinizov and kinizovis. So it's much easier to explain that the chatois and the shamayis are related to chiyuvim. But the brisa doesn't say anything about zovim and zovis. The brisa just says chatasoi dam chatasoi v'dam hashamoi, which could mean any type of chatas, any type of lashon, which once again proves that the kohanim are not our shluchim, because if they were our shluchim, and I'm not allowed to have enough from this kohen, how could the kohen be zoyrich my dam chatas and my dam hasham? And for the Gemara, no, we're not referring to any chatas. We're referring to the same limited scope of chatois as in our Mishnah. Dam chatois shal mitzayra, the dam hashamay shal mitzayra, which once again are those of mechusrei kippurim. Tichsiv zois tia Torah sa mitzayra ben gadol uben katan. So once again we've deflected this raya. A regular carbon, this kohen who's also b'adna would not be able to be makriv on behalf of a Yisrael who's not allowed to have enough from him. But mechusrei kippurim is different, as Rabbi Yehuda taught us, that Mechusar Kippurim do not nidas. And Mechusar Kippurim, once again, are people that are mechuyev to bring karbanos in order to allow them to eat kachim. They're coming off the end of some type of sequence of tahira, whether it's tahira for a yoledes, whether it's tahira for a person who's a mitzayra, whether it was tahira for a person who was a zav or a zava. When you're coming off such a process, only those karbanos are considered karbanos that don't need das, and therefore, even if you hold that kohanim are shluchim of the people, a kohen would still be allowed to be makriv of such a korban because those don't need das. Tanan we learned. So once again, we're attacking this issue of this bringing a korban for somebody else without das. Tanan we learned. HaKohanim shepiglu b'mikdosh. Kohanim that had a machshavas pigel. So they're shechting someone's korban oila, and while they're shechting the oila, they have in mind to be makriv deimurim chutz l'zmanoi or chutz l'mklaimai, or the kohen is being makriv the chatos on behalf of somebody, and he has in mind to eat the basar of the chatos at the wrong time. So if he did this, and that of course invalidates, it passes the korban, which means if I'm mechuyev to bring a korban and they got messed up, now there's going to be a cost to me because I have to now bring another korban. So mezidin, if the kohanim did this on purpose, they sabotaged my korban, chayavan. They have to pay me for my damages, the person who owns the korban. Hashogigin, however, if the kohanim did it by mistake, what's the mistake? Maybe they didn't know they're not allowed to eat it after that late time. Peturin, then they'll be potter. Elisha pigul and pigul. So it still is a machshavas pigul. So they still had in mind to eat the korban out of the time span that they were allowed to eat it in, but they didn't know that that would mess up the whole korban. So therefore, they're not responsible to pay the owner damages, but the korban is still not valid. So if they're shluchim of the Rebbeinu Shalom, hainu shepikul on pigul, that would explain why their pigul would be a pigul. But if there are shluchim, amai pigul on pigul, why would their pigul be considered pigul? Let the owner say, Shlicha shevisich l'skuni. I sent you to be my shliach, to be makriv my korban, but not to harm me, to help me, to assist me. So your shlichus is null and void if you're going to do something that's going to work against me. Let's see the Ran, because the Ran makes a distinction between if it was mazid or if it was shoyim. Zok the Gemara. Elo, amai pigul and pigul. So the first thing the Ran tells us that not all the Rishonim agree with is shoygig hu dekashalei. We're not asking the kasha why mazid. We understand why mazid, but it's from shoygig that we have the kasha. Why? Why? The same way you're going to cut off my shlichus as a shoygig, you can cut off my shlichus as a mazid. I didn't hire you, so to speak, to do damage to me. Sokteran, the bishlama b'mezid, nehid shlucha didaninu. Yes, you are our shluchim, but if you had this machshava of chutz l'zmanoi on purpose, knowing that it would cause pigul on pigul, there your machshava will work and it will overrule my objection to the shlichus. Why? The kivan shemefagel b'mezid, since the kohen is doing it on purpose. At that time, I am not acting on behalf of the Bailam. I'm not doing what I'm doing as a shliach. I'm doing this as an independent. Clearly, what I'm doing is my own act. I'm not trying to represent the Bailam in this act. No one's going to suggest that this is what the Bailam wanted me to do. The Kaim along the Perek Beis of Chulun, and in the second Perek of Chulun, we've learned the Adam Oiser Davar She'ena Shaloi Aydei Maisa. When you're doing an actual Maisa, you can even answer somebody else's korban. This is the point that the Rosh argues on. And the Rosh says, Ein Adam Oiser Davar She'ena Shaloi. But the Ran says here, Adam Oiser Davar She'ena Shaloi Aydei Maisa. Since I'm actually doing a Maisa, I'm doing a Shrik, I'm doing a Shchit, I'm doing a Voida, through that, you can answer someone else's thing. You're not acting on behalf of the owner, you're acting on behalf of yourself, and you're causing damage to the owner's property. But if you do this b'shoigig, so then you don't have an intention to cause any damage. You actually think that you're acting on behalf of the owner and you're doing what the owner wants. Well, ishlucha didaninu, If there are shluchim and my pigul and pigul, then why should my pigul even have any impact at all? The akiva and the shoygig who, since the kohen is doing it, the shoygig lava dati did shake of it. He's not doing this independently to damage the carbon. I think I'm doing exactly what the Bible wants. And if I knew the Bible didn't want this, even I wouldn't want it. So therefore, only when it's a shoygig is where the Gemara is asking from, according to the Ran, that since you did it b'shoygig, you're not acting on your own, you're acting on my behalf. Well, I don't need you on my behalf, because I only want you to do something that's of benefit to me, not something that's of damage to me. And for the Gemara, shiny gabi pigel, even though technically the shlichus should be bottled, there's a special gzeres hakasav to tell you that this works to damage the carbon. And the Rosh, as we read it, lo yachshoiv loy. One should not have an improper thought when he's doing pigel, but if one has an improper thought, even though with all the choshen mishpatik laws, technically you're not a shliach, there's a gzeres hakasav that your machshava will aser the carbon. Let's just take a peek. I'm sorry? Okay, gewaltig. So let's have a look. Let's have a look at the Rosh who says this. V'darshinon b'yavizvachim kribay lo yachshoy. And of course, I needed tziyonim here. Kenish len gemuda un tziyonim, because they tell you what everything is supposed to say. So it says over here yachshoy. So lo yachshoy. Alma, you see a gezeres hakosav that machshavas hamakriv have a machshava live soil. Afal gav de lavdi dehu, even though it's not his. Okay, gewaltig. So let us see the next Gemara. So once again, we're talking about. Well, actually, I made a mistake, because this last raya was actually directly on the question of shlucha didon and shlucha derachmana. Now we're going to go back to look at this idea of being able to bring karbanos for his wife, for others without their das. So this is the end of the sugya of if kohanim are our shluchim or not. Clearly, we tried several different places to bring a raya one way or the other, and we were not successful. So the Ran tells us at the end, miu nehida hakalo yevshitalo, even though here we were not successful in bringing a raya to either tzad of the shaila, nevertheless, mahida perkamid kedushin muchrach the shluchi shmayininu v'chamush ksaf to the maila, and the raya that the Ran told us earlier, the Gemara brought in kedushin to conclude this shaila is, if you're going to say that the kohanim are shluchim of the Bnei Yisrael, that would be impossible, because you normally cannot appoint a shliach to do something on your behalf that you couldn't do yourself. A Yisrael can't do that by that, can't do this rika. So therefore, the kohen cannot be representing him. The kohen must be acting, representing, or working for the Rebbeinu Shalom. Okay, let's see the Gemara. Gufa. Now we're going to go back and analyze what Rabbi Yochanan said. Gufa. So just to remind yourselves, Rabbi Yochanan said, "Hakol tzrichen das chutz mi mechutzer kapara." Mechutzer kapara don't need das, because you see in the Torah by mechutzer kapurim, someone can bring someone else's carbon without das. And where do we see that? Shari Adam maybe carbon al bonov of al benois of aktanim, and we learned that from the pasuk of Zois Torah Sazal. Correct the Gemara. If that's the case, you should say the definition of chatas chelev is a regular carbon chatas for someone who ate chelev by mistake. And the Gemara always refers to a standard carbon chatas as a chatas chelev. But of course, any chi of course that a person would have violated would also generate a chatas chelev, even though he didn't eat chelev. Chazer, you don't, like you say, chazer tzart, that's right. So based on this, you're going to tell me that I could bring a chatas chelev for my friend. Why is that? Shekin adam maybe al ishtay saita Krav Yehuda. Al ishtay saita Krav Yehuda. We learned just on the bottom of 11 days that someone can bring the karbanos of a yoledis for his wife who's a shaita.
Isn't that in the Zolbazach misleading because by extension they are part of it?
No, it's because you don't need das, the Gemara says. You don't need das. So the problem over here, the Ran says because you don't need das. But the problem over here is it's a little bit of a stretch. The Gemara on Amud Beis that says a person can bring a carbon for his wife as shaita, that's because it says Toyas Hayoledes. It's referring to the carbonus of Hayoledes. Who said that a person can bring a chelav chatos on behalf of his wife? If his wife eats chelav, could he bring such a carbon without her das? But let me just finish my sentence. Let me finish my sentence. So over here, the Gemara is naming on. For some reason, the Gemara is naming on, which the Gemara is going to retract from. But for some reason, the Gemara is naming on here that even though we have a pasuk that says a person can bring a carbon yoledes for his wife, the Gemara is extending it and assuming that a person could also bring a chatas chela for his wife. That's a little bit of a stretch. In fact, Rabbi Akiva Eger disagrees with that stretch because Rabbi Akiva Eger says, "Koshali hamad aminu il gaba yoledes shekin maybe al ishtoi Rabbi Yehuda hainu kivan chiyuv carbon isha al baila mukmes." The chiyuv of the yoledes of the carbon yoledes is on the husband because mukmi lekra. That's how we stole down the pasuk of lezois teres hayoledes. L'rabbis is to shoita. Like the Ran taught us on the Amud Beis. But a standard chatos, that's not learned from the pasuk of zois teres hayoledes. Like siv teres, like rebuya. Uve'emes ein maybe al ishtoi shoita. Where did the Gemara get this from? That you could bring a carbon chatos for your wife who's a shoita. So who's a shoita? I keep on mixing up. Who's a shoita? Kivin the tzarech das. Since that would be das, the tzarech lin gadol. So yesterday we had a tzarech and today we have a tzarech lin gadol. You're saying something. I believe so.
Yesterday we said that the reason was because every woman has an army because she doesn't have her own army. Yeah. And we said that they can bring the diversity so that the deep reason is because she doesn't have any money. Right, so all
that's not all the Gemara brought yesterday was that you see he could bring a carbon without her das, and that's why he could bring a carbon usher even though she's not an ashira. But that's not where the whole Yosy comes from. Here, let's take a peek back at what the Gemara said. The Gemara said at the bottom of the page, right? He zois teres hayoledes ben pekachas ben shoita shekein adam maybe carbon al ishtoi shoita kediver Rabbi Yehuda. So that's the since Rabbi Yehuda holds that a person can bring the carbon yoledes on behalf of his wife who's a shoita, you see that you don't need das. The Tanya Rabbi Yehuda Omer adam maybe carbon asher al ishtoi v'chal carbon shechayava shekach chayshavah. So that's just a zaytik piece of information. Once I know that he could bring the carbon, so then he could bring any carbon that he wants. Well, the Gemara right now is assuming that kol karbanos shechayeves means all karbanos. That's why the Gemara is asking. But Rabbi Akiva Eger asks, why would the Gemara think that if you don't have a pasuk of zois toras by a regular chatos? You only have the pasuk of zois toras by a yoledes.
What's the reason?
Okay, so now you're the push-up shot we have. Now you want to say maybe we should maybe
that's what I
learned. We should add it on. Could be that's why the Gemara is making that stretch. Could be that's why the Gemara is making that stretch. But the Gemara is making that stretch, right? So maybe your reason is valid. The Gemara is trying to apply this to all karbonis as well. So Zok to Gemara, no, we don't have a raya. But first of all, Alam Omar Balazar, according to your reasoning, a person should be able to bring a chatos for his wife. Yet Rabbi Elazar said not so. Rabbi Elazar said, "Hifrish chatas chelev al chaveirei." If you're mafresh a chatas chelev for your friend, lo yasotum. And we know once you could do it first, if you can bring a chatas chelev for your wife, why shouldn't you be able to bring a chatas chelev for a stranger? It's the same carbon. So the Ran says, where do we know this from that Rabbi Elazar holds? It's because the loidonin efsher mishayi efsher. Where do we see clearly you could be makar of a carbon for somebody else? That's when that person is a shoita. When his wife is a shoita, he can be makar of a carbon on her behalf. If she's not a shoita, who said you could be makar of a carbon? So just because when someone's a shoita, you could be makar of a carbon for them, who said you could be makar of a carbon for them if they're not a shoita? Because the loy don in afsher mishayi afsher. You never bring a raya from a case where there was no other option. We have to have somebody else bring a carbon on behalf of another who's a shoita. You can't bring a raya from there that if there is another option, for instance, the pikeach could bring the carbon themselves, there you wouldn't necessarily say that you could bring a carbon. So let me finish the Gemara's terms. So ishtay shoita hechidami. The Gemara is now attacking the whole premise. You made an assumption that you could bring a chatas chelav on behalf of your wife who's a shoita. Let's see if that's true. What was exactly the case? Ida achla kishi shoita. If she ate chelav when she was a shoita, well then she doesn't even have a chiyuv to bring a chatas in the first place. Lav bas korbani. The ida achla kishi pekachas. And if she ate chelav when she was a pekachas, which then triggered a chiyuv chatas for her, vinishtatis, and only afterwards did she lose her mind. What if someone ate chelav and then was mafresh a carbon, vinishtata, and they became a shoita, and then the chazav vinishtava, and then they became healthy again, puzzle. That carbon is now puzzle because hoil v'nitcha yitcha. Once something is pushed away and it cannot be brought, it could never come back again. So this woman, if she became a shoita later on, her carbon does not have to be brought anyway. So where would it ever even be nageya that someone would bring a carbon for his wife who's a shoita other than a yeledes? Never. So therefore, you don't have a raya that a chatas chelav should ever be brought by somebody else. Let's see the helig around. Let's see the helig around. Ishtay shoita hechidoni. Kloimer la'olam b'chihadonen. In fact, you would don afsher b'shi afsher. And if in fact you would have a raya that by an ishtay shoita you could bring a carbon chatas chelav, yes, then you could bring a chatas on behalf of anybody. But that's not true. Elamai Amar Rabbi Huda, the other maybe alishtay shoita loy chatas chelav ka'amar. He wasn't talking about a chatas chelav. El carbon yeledes. He was only referring to the carbon yeledes. The chatas chelav efsher. The hechadami. What would be the case? And the Gemara shows that practically speaking, it would never be relevant for a shoita to have a chiyuv to bring a chatas chelav. The chiyuv shiptura efsher shiyavi ba'ilala. If she's part of a machatos, you can't bring one for her. There is no chiyuv. Is what you're saying? Right. She's not. I think that's exactly what the Gemara is saying.
That's number one. And number two, the shala is when somebody becomes a shoyt after he does an alayla. Does the virus come fly away, or he's not? It's not possible to do.
So that's a nice lom to shala. But I'm not getting into that lom. The net result is that there's no carbon that's going to be brought. So maybe we should have a whole Rosh Hashanah about the lumos of it.
So what's the mass? The mass, what's the story?
The mass is she doesn't bring a carbon. He does not bring a carbon for her. If it's a chatas chelav, he does not bring a carbon for her because it doesn't say zois tayras. It says zois tayras. There's a special person.
So the from zois tayras you see that even she ate some food. The Torah says bring it anyway.
I don't see Yosy, because you want to shtel it to a regular chatas. The Gemara doesn't say that. The Gemara says only for a yeledes. Only the karbanos of a yeledes. Yeah. No matter when, whether she was a shoyta by yeledes or even if she came a shoyta later, either way, the husband would bring the carbon for her.
So that means that you have a shoyta that's mechir.
So you're saying that should apply to a chatas. It doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean that. It means what the Torah says. Only for yeledes. Okay, I don't want to continue the conversation because we already found the point where you hold it's not right. You hold automatically should apply, and I don't have the answer to that question. But at least the facts are you're asking me that the facts are that the Gemara is saying that applies to your leathers and not the chatas. You want to know why? Okay, so we're holding by the five of us. I'm happy we have the vus. The five of us I'll leave for the Rosh Hashanah. Because let's see the Gemara weiter. So Elamayata Yovi Adam Pesach al Chaveroi. Let a person be able to bring a carbon Pesach for his friend. Normally, you have to count yourself in. You have to register for the carbon Pesach. Maybe not. Maybe I should be able to bring a carbon for him without him knowing about it. How do I know? Because a person could bring a carbon Pesach. He could include them without them specifically signing up. Alam Omer Rabbi Lozer. Why did Rabbi Lozer say Hivrish Pesach al Chaveiroi lost of like Lum? It doesn't work. He has to be there himself. Omer Rabbi Zera, let me tell you a chiddush. You know why he could include his children in a carbon Pesach without their das? Is Selevei Sovos Lav Deraisa. This halacha that we know that every single person has to take part in the carbon Pesach, that's not midaraisa. Midaraisa, and here's where there's a machlokes for shoynim. Midaraisa, the Ran learns that although every child is mechuyev to eat from the carbon Pesach, they don't have to make minui. There's no chiyuv for them to make minui. They can eat without minui. Although there are some Rishonim who learn that they don't even have a chiyuv to eat from the carbon Pesach midaraisa. So it's not deraisa. So let's see the Ran. Let's see the Ran. I'm doing that a cotton, correct. So let's see the Ran. So the Ran says, Omer Abzer Selevei Sovos Lav Deraisa La'olam B'Chiyai Donen. Avada you would don Efsher Mishi Efsher. Umi Pesach Lemotzi Lamedek. There's no Raya from Pesach. The Selevei Sovos Lav Deraisa. So look what the Ran says. The Minat Torah Ein Aktanim Trichen Lehimonois B'Seh Im B'nei Chabura Elo Oichlin Mimenu Alpha B'Shlo Nimdu Olav. The Ran is very clear. There's Avada Achiv for every child, every cotton to eat. They just don't have to be Mimana on the Chabura. But Avada, they have a Chiv to eat. The Avagav, the Ein Pesach Nechel Elul Nuyav. We say in the Mishnah every day, Ein Pesach Nechel Elul Nuyav. Hanamili B'Ru'uyin Lehimonos, that only applies to adults. Aval Katanim Delav B'nei Hachi, less Lamba. But of course, other Rishonim learn that there's no Chiv for a cotton to eat. Nevertheless, the Gemara brings a raya. I'm going to prove to you from a Mishnah that there's no chiyuv minui for a cotton, because it says in the Mishnah, I know one thing. If my father told me I'm inviting you for Pesach to Eretz Yisrael, to Yerushalayim, and he's taking care of Yom Tov, I'd get on the plane, I'd be there on the next plane. He wouldn't need to convince me. But vice versa, this fellow had a problem getting his children to come. So he says, whoever makes it to Yerushalayim first, I'm going to include him on my carbon Pesach. The rest of you will have to figure it out on your own. So the halacha is, where's the finish line? Who has, which line do you need to get to first to be zoicha, to be nismana with your father in the carbon? Kivin shehichnis risha in Rosh Hashanah, once the first person gets Rosh Hashanah into the city limits, zocha bechelkai. He's going to be zoicha to be nismana with his father, and umizaka es ochav imai. And not only that, he can then go and be mizaka his brothers. If you're going to say that midaraisa, each person has to be nismana, al bisrakai. He's already shechted it. He's already shechted the carbon pesach. Umizaka lahu, and now he's being mizaka. You can't be nismana while the animal, after the animal is shechted. You have to be nismana while the animal is still alive. So obviously, this is not really working. Obviously, he had kavanah to be miman everybody. Why did the father say that I'm only going to have in mind somebody who's here first? It's kedei lazar mitzvahs, just to get them to move quickly and to get to Yerushalayim quickly. Let's see the Heilig Aram. He told his children, his sons, I'm going to Yerushalayim. Who wants to join me? And when I get there, I'm going to shech my carbon pesach, and I'm going to have in mind to include the one of you who arrives first.
Don't arrive or not really puzzled from Pesach for whatever reason. They're right?
Well, no, let's see what happens. Al bisrakoi kisha Allah zeh kfar nishchat. By the time this guy gets up to Yerushalayim, it was already shechted. Then Cain heich nimnalav. How could he even include the first child? V'ksiv miyosh miseh v'darshinim echiyuzel leseh umezaka lahain vitmiyah. So the Ran has two nuschois here. I wasn't ignoring you. This is what's relevant. How could the father even include anybody? Even the first son, how could he include one that shechted already? The son doesn't make it up till after the shechita. Inami, or maybe the cash is not for the first son. The first son, there's a good structural way to make it work. Hi umizaka lahem Who ben shoyla rishon koi teich mezaka la'och. Maybe the kash is only how he'll be mezaka his brothers. The bishlam ihu zachi. We understand how it works with him, even though he's showing up first after the carbon was shechted. Dikala meimar kiven shoyla rishon. Since he did arrive first, however, it's the gloying milsel of afrayet mevar the tanai shekishen nishchat pesach olav nishchat. When the father shechted, he was the one who was zoichet to that minoi even before he was in Yerushalayim, because he was going to be there first. But there's definitely no way to explain how now, after the Shechita, when he becomes identified as the one who was Nisman in the carbon, how can he include his brothers? So I was just trying to show from here that they're all coming. They're all going to come to Yerushalayim. They're just not going to have a carbon pesach. They'll have to bring their own. If they're not coming, they don't need zichur. They're part of the carbon pesach. If they were there for Chayka, they're part of the carbon pesach.
Right.
So they obviously all showed up, and now they have to find their own carbon.
Because he was because the father was only the one who arrived first.
Correct.
That's what he said. Charles, what he really.
Right. So the Gemara says Allah Chalamaysa. Of course, he meant to be Mamana everybody. He was just trying to create a buzz to get his children not to show up at the last minute.
So at the time of Shechita, right pre-Shechita, anybody wants to be Yosy with kids, it has to be. They don't necessarily have to be within his vicinity.
That's right. They don't have to be there. They could be anywhere.
It could be anywhere in Yerushalayim.
Why do they have to be in Yerushalayim?
They don't.
Why do they have to be in Yerushalayim? As long as they're there for the night to eat. Why do they have to be there?
They don't have to be there at the time.
They can't be Tomei, but they don't have to be there. They could be flying in on an airplane from.
They're shechting at 12 o'clock, right?
So they don't have to be there. They could be Mamana Shliach.
That's from but yes, they have to be in the so you could.
I don't know. I don't know. Just because I don't know, that doesn't mean that's not the case. But if they have to be there, if they don't have to be there, whatever the law is. But I think that I don't think they have to be there.
Be within the chiyuv to be Yosy. They're not in Yerushalayim. They're in Pesach, then they're not in the chiyuv of going Pesach.
So do you know that from the Gemara, or you're suggesting that because of your own logic?
I'm yeah, of course.
Oh, so I don't. We have to talk. I don't remember such a restriction. I only remember the Gemara discussing if someone's tamei, like if somebody was tamei sheret to the shaila, if he'll be Torah tonight, but now he's tamei, could he be included? But I don't recall ever.
He's in Yerushalayim. He's not in Yerushalayim.
I never heard of such a restriction, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Doesn't have to be in Yerushalayim, it has to be out.
He has to be across the river saying, "I'm here. I'm here."
I guess he has to be able to. He has to be able to get there for the nighttime.
But he doesn't have to be there every time.
I don't think so. I don't think so. Okay. Well, there's two mitzvahs. There's a mitzvah of Achilas HaPesach and there's a mitzvah of Akrova. He's definitely going to miss the mitzvah of Akrova. But for the Achilas Pesach, he could be in this man. So let me just finish the Gemara.
The say means that the chiyus of the say means that you have to be Allah.
It's a lie. It's a lie. That's right. Tanya Namihachi, Ma'isa Haya. There was a story. The Kadnu Banim the Banais Lebanim. The women got there before the men. His daughters got there first. The Nimsu Banais Rizaisu Banim Shvelim. The girls were all fired up. It's like they say, on the way to seminary, on the way to Eretz Yisrael, the Bacham are looking in their Gemaras and the girls are watching the movie. And on the way back from Eretz Yisrael, the Bacham are watching the movie and the girls are learning. So the girls were all misragish. They wanted to be kind of mitzvah. They showed up first. The boys, yeah, we'll get there. It's okay. I'll be okay. So the Mishnah also says that a kohen, not a kohen, someone who's Asur Bano on his friend can still go and be mafresh truma on behalf of his friend. And
the last line that I see.
Because they're not nismana, right? Amal and Nischamna Lazar is Bulvad. He was just trying to encourage them to get there quickly. So this term is Truma. The Gemara wants to know now who's providing the Truma, who's providing the Das, which remained unknown when we learned the Mishnah. Now the Gemara is going to analyze it carefully. Ibayalu. The Gemara starts off with a shayla. Hatayr mishaloi al shol kaveirei. My friend has 1,000 pounds of tevel, and I want to save him some money. Now, if he would have to give his own truma out of 1,000 pounds, he has to give 2%. He's going to have to give 20 pounds. I want to save him the 20 pounds. So I take my own 20 pounds of tevel, and I say that my 20 pounds of tevel should be truma for his 2,000 pounds, for his 1,000 pounds of tevel, and now he can use all of his tevel because I've already taken care of the truma portion. So Could I do it even if he doesn't know about it? Or do I need him to agree with it? Do we say, even this chusuloi, since I'm definitely benefiting him, I'm saving him 20 pounds of teva. Loi tzarech das, therefore I shouldn't need his das, because zachin la'odem shloi b'fanav, like the Ran says, the zachin la'odem shloi b'fanav, and therefore umistama havelik shluchei, using the din of zichoy, I'm like a shliach. Oidilma mitzvah dilehu, or maybe it's his mitzvah, and he doesn't care that he's saving. It's his mitzvah of afroshes truma. Mitzvah dilehi v'nichem le'lema'avdei. And the halacha is, it is a mitzvah. Hafroshes truma is a mitzvah for zich. What happens if you're not even planning to eat any of the produce? You're going to leave it in the field. You're still mechuyev to be mafresh trumas and maestros. So it's my mitzvah. I want to do it. I don't want you to do it. So what is the halacha? Can you be Torah mishaloi al shachaver? Tashma, from our very Mishnah. Our Mishnah says Torah mes trumoisav ves maisroisav lidaitoi. Those are the words of our Mishnah. So b'may askino, what exactly is the case in our Mishnah? Ilema, and we need a bach over here. Ilema Michel Balakri al Balakri. I'm not providing any of my own produce. I'm just doing the hafrasha for him. I'm being mavrish from his payers on his payers. Ulidaitoi demand. When the Mishnah says I'm doing it with the knowledge of the owner of the knowledge, with whose knowledge? Ilema lidaitoi delay. If it's with my own knowledge, meaning the Baal doesn't know about it, I'm just going on my own into your property and I'm being mafresh trumas from your own payers. Man shavi shliach. Who made him in a shliach? What authority does he have to do that? And the Ran tells us, "Hadashinon ma'atem l'daitchem, av shluchachem l'daitchem." You will not become a shliach unless the owner appointed you. A stranger can't just come in and be mafresh trumas for you, right? The only tzad that I could do it for you is because I'm saving you the fruit. But if I'm doing it with your fruit, then surely I need a shliach. So it must be that the Balakri said, please go do that for me. Please be mafresh trumas for me. But if that's the case, how is that allowed in our Mishnah? Now, surely the owner is benefiting from me. I'm providing him a free service. I am being mafresh trumas and maishas for him. So that can't be what our Mishnah means. Ella needs to be mishaloi al shelch bal hakri. It must mean that the person who's doing the Trumas and Maishers is sponsoring the Trumas and Maishers. He's paying for it. And now I have Zachan Lod Mishleib Fun, and that's why I can do it without the Das Balbayis. Uladai demand. So who do I have Das from? Ilema Ladai the Balakri. If I have Das Balakri, it's the same problem. Hakamahanale. Once again, I'm being Mahanim, he's not allowed to have enough of me. It must be that he's doing it without any type of knowledge of the owner, but he's doing it because and going into the Bach, Ella lav l'datei davshei. If you hold that when you're term for yourself on your chaver, you need das. So then, how does this work? Right? If you say you need das, it will not work. So you have a raya from our Mishnah that you could be Torah al shel chavera even without das. The reason why there's no problem of him being over this or no is because you weren't doing it for him, because you were able to do it without his das. That's why it works. But the problem is you have a raya here that it works without his das. So it's more no, that's not the case. Lo'ilami shel balakri al balakri. So that takes us to the problem. That means we need das. And if I have das, I'm doing the shlichus. And if I'm doing the shlichus, I'm being mahanim, and that's not allowed. So Gemara, no, there's a middle ground. The owner never appointed me to the truma. He expressed a very powerful expression. Whoever wants to come to truma could do truma. That would be the case over here. Is he said, I'm using the balabais as truma, and I'm using the balabais payers to give us truma, to be mistaken the balabais payers. Why am I allowed to do it? Because I'm not being mahanim, I'm not giving him any of my own, and I'm not doing the shlichus because he didn't tell me to do shlichus. He just said, and now we're going to learn a round. Let me finish around. We're going to learn a round now that's going to literally be the guidebook for how liberal politicians speak and how careful they are to lie, but they'll be able to technically say that they were saying the truth. And the Iran's going to analyze the nuances of different expressions and what they mean. Because this is like a minu of a shlichus without really a minu of a shlichus, right? So let's see what the Iran says. It will work for truma, and I could do this for you even though you were not memanim yud shliach. Why? The begilu das bilchud nichalei sogi. Merely by making a comment that I would be happy if someone did it, even though I didn't actually ask someone to do it, that gives someone the authority to be mafresh trumas and maitras. But ulagabe muder hano loy choshev mahana. Even the loy mash v'loy idach shlich v'hedya. So you see how this is literally dancing a fine line. I'm giving you enough authorization that you could do it for me, but you're not my shliach. Umiyu. I'm giving you enough authorization that you could be mafresh trumas and maitras on my behalf, but you're not my shliach.
Or yes or no?
Trudeau would for sure understand this round. Trudeau would for sure. So if a guy like Trudeau would understand this round, for sure we should. Umiyu. So let's go weiter. Umiyu. Davka, you have to be very careful with what you say. Davka ba'omer kol ha'roitza litrim yavav yitron. Avli omar kol ha'shemea koili yitron. If he says whoever hears this, please take truma. That shlichus ma'al yahava. That would be a real shlichus. The usher b'mudur hano, and it would be usher for someone who I'm not allowed to have a no from. He wouldn't be able to do that for me. So I mean, if someone says kol ha'shemea koili yizoin, whoever hears my voice should be mafarnis my wife. Then we say whoever was mafarnis his wife is doing that on his behalf. Umafkina. Umafkina miditana. We know this from a Mishnah beperkes kabel. The gabe get mahani. Imam kol ha'shemea koili yichtav get lishti. A guy is in a bar, he's trapped, and he screams, and he's being taken away, we'll never see him again. And he screams, whoever hears my voice, write a get. That's called a good minui shlichus. By get, for sure, it needs to be a shlichus. And like Chaim said, obviously, truma doesn't need a full shlichus. It's enough with a gilo das. Clearly, get wouldn't work under these terms. Get needs a proper minui shlichus. Umiyo on the flip side, ki amina de la truma mi mahani. That we say that it does give you authorization to be mafresh trumas on my behalf. That's davka de amri b'hai lishna the lishna mitzi asahava. This is a lashon that's middle of the road. It's not too much of a minu shlichus, but it also gives me enough authority. Mishum hachi nehida lagabi mudar loy have a shlichus. Even though lagabi the mudar being over someone doing something for him, he's not making the shliach, so therefore it's not being considered done as a shlichus for me, so therefore there's no problem of Israel. No, litruma miyas mahani. It's good enough to authorize somebody to take truma from me. Avali Omer kol ha'torem einay mafsid. But if the word she used was whoever takes a truma will not lose out, after the afidu legabe truma loy mahani. Kobe, that wouldn't even be enough of an authorization to do truma. The lav lishna al yehu ki yove v'yitron. Yove v'yitron has a stronger connotation of authority, of authorization, than just saying einay mafsid. So it's literally a fine line, exactly enough to be enough of an authorization to be mafresh truma, but not enough to be considered a shliach. To ha'omer kol azon einay mafsid. If someone said kol azon einay mafsid, the cholach echad v'zon, and someone said, oh, this guy said I won't lose, I'm going to go give money to his wife, and I'm going to go collect it from him. The halach is einay chayav l'shalem to l'shav shliach klal. That's not any type of appointment at all, and therefore it's not a right. I won't touch him. Okay, Zok to Gemara. If someone is mafresh trumas on behalf of somebody, so when you're mafresh trumas, now this truma has to be given to a kohen. Who gets to pick? Who gets to decide which kohen it will go to? I have a buddy a kohen, so I want to get to my buddy. Or maybe the owner of the property, the owner of all the produce that was nisakin, he should say who the truma goes to. Now, I laid out the money. I'm the one who stellt to the payers. Do I get to decide who gets it? And there's a monetary value to it. Why? Because let's say a kohen is not allowed to come and ask for the trumas. He's not allowed to say, I'll do you a favor, I'll work for you, I'll help you out, and let me have your trumas. That's kohen hamisayeh bevis agronis. That's a terrible isser. But what if I'm a Yisrael and I have an item of kohen, right? If I have an item of kohen, now it'll cost me $500 a week to give my item money for food, right? But if I go over to a property owner and say, listen, you're giving away your truma anyway. It's not you have to give it away anyway. I'll give you $200, give it to my item. So now my item's a coin. Now I was able to support my item with $200 instead of with $500. So who gets that $200? Is it the person who's sponsoring the payers, or is it the owner of the field? So Zaktimar, mi amrina, do we say ilaf peri deheich mi misakne kridahu? If it wasn't for this generous donor who's sponsoring the payers of Truma, there would be no tikkun. So this generous donor, he should be the one to decide what to do with these pairs. Oidilma, ilaf kridahu, if it wasn't for the fact that this person had a whole pile of pairs that needed tikkun that were tevel, loyhavian peri dadein truma. Your pairs wouldn't have become truma if it wasn't for my tevel. So who gets the tevel salah?
What's the bad side? That's the shtim.
No, you wouldn't have truma to give. You wouldn't have truma to give. Who caused? It's not good or bad. Who caused the truma? Did he cause the truma, or did he cause the truma? So Amarlai, so he answered. So Reb Zeir answered. Amar Kra, it says it's called Tvua Sarecha, and then it says afterwards Vinosata. Let's see the Lashon HaPosuk. It says the Lashon HaPosuk is Aser to Aser, it's called Tvua Sarecha, Hayayta Shana Shana Shana, and then and later on it says Vinosata. So the Gemara, so Reb Zeir Darshan that the Vinosata is going on, it's called Tvua Sarecha. The person who owns the Tvua Sarecha, the person who owns the field, he's the person who controls the Vinosata. So Rav is saying the owner of the field of the payers, the recipient of that donation, he also gets to decide who gets the truma. Back to our Mishnah. If you hold that when Yener gives the payers, So remember, we've already concluded that the case of our Mishnah is not when Yener gave the payers, when he was doing it for you, right? But now the Gemara is going back again. This is a Gemara that didn't necessarily happen after the first Gemara. This Gemara happened independently. So the Gemara is still assuming here that a third donor, this fellow, gave payers to me. Now I'm having a no because you're giving me payers that I now get to control which coin it should go to. You must have arrived from here that Toiva Sana delay. That in fact, who has the Toiva Sana? The person who gives it. It's speaking where he didn't sponsor any payers. He's just providing a service for me, but he's using my payers in order to be misaka my payers. And you have my das. Why is the shlichus? Is like we said earlier, so this is where Rabbi said this a lot. Toshma. What happens if someone is mechuyev to bring a carbon? He did an avera, he has to bring a carbon chatos, for instance. And I was kind enough to provide an animal. I said this animal should be a carbon for Chaim Yankel who needs this carbon. So what happens if this animal gets a mum and you want to be poided? The loch is if your carbon gets a mum and you yourself are poided, you have to add 20% to the cost of the pigeon. But if somebody else wants to be poided, he just has to pay the fair value. So who is considered the owner of this carbon? So Zok the Gemara, Hamaktish Moisef Chaimish. The donor of the animal, if he wants to redeem this animal, he has to add 20%. Now there's another rule that requires ownership. Tamura. There's halacha that you're not allowed to make truma, but if you make truma, if you said zu tamura zu, it would work. But only the owner can do that. Who is the owner of the carbon? Who would be able to make tamura? Zokt the Gemara, umischaper oishu tamura. The Gemara brings psukim and Mesechus Tamura to teach us that the owner of the carbon, the guy making the tamura, is the person who is going to have the kapara from it. So she's the recipient of the donation. And v'atoyer mishaloi al she'ena shaloi. If you are generous enough to provide payers to be toyer on behalf of somebody else, toivas hana shaloi, you keep the toivas hana. So this is a raya from a brisa keneged what Reb Zeira paskin, and it's proof positive that in fact the donor is the one who decides. The problem is Reb Zeira brought a raya from a pasuk He said Tzvor Sarecha v'Nasata. Zokt around, instead of saying the v'Nasata is going back on Tzvor Sarecha, the v'Nasata is going back on the first words of the pasuk, on Aser to Aser. The person who provided the Meiser, he gets the v'Nasata. So he'll just learn the v'Nasata is going back on an earlier point. Okay, we got to rush because it's 6:52. Zok to Gemara Bater. Yilamdeinu Mikra. Melamde Medrash. Halachas v'Haggados avalo yilamdeinu Mikra. Mikra my time alo yilamdeinu. Why can't you teach him Chumash? Mishum dekamahanile, because you're benefiting him. Well, guess what? Medrash nami kamahanile. You're benefiting him as well when you're teaching him Gemara and Halacha. Amar Shmuel. It's speaking in a case where you would normally be paid for teaching somebody mikra, therefore you're not allowed to do it because you're saving him that money. But it's in a place where you know you never pay somebody to teach you medrash. So therefore, by me teaching it to him, he doesn't owe me any money anyway. So there's no benefit to him. We'll stop here, and tomorrow we're going to learn about if you have to pay malamdim or not, and if you do have to pay them, how much you have to pay them.
The shal is the word reading or
No, it means chumash. It means chumash. That means b'davka chumash.
Teaching reading.
That's exactly what the Gemara says. Tomorrow is that piece of time when you're